Please welcome Eli Yokley. Eli Yokley is with Morning Consult, and we're going to talk about these numbers. Eli, good morning. Thanks for joining us.
Hey, happy Wednesday.
Yeah, to you. Thank you. First of all, I need to ask, everybody always says, well, they don't believe polls, whatever. But how did you get the numbers before we go on here?
Yeah. So we do online surveys every single day asking about every governor, senator, President Biden in all 50 states. And each quarter, we kind of zoom out, do like a 3-month view. And so it's a ton of responses from across the country. And we do it on a quarterly basis so we can compare apples to apples, how senators are doing in small states like Montana to big states like California. And, West Virginia is always an interesting one with you're a very famous senator there.
Indeed, it is. So, Eli, what did you find out about Joe Manchin?
Well, he is the fourth most unpopular senator in the country. 42% of voters in West Virginia approve of his job performance, 48% disapprove. Those numbers are not great, but they do mark an improvement from the beginning of this year. His disapproval rating has declined by about 7 points during this period, and some of that seems to be driven by Republican voters in the state. Our latest figures show he's underwater with Republican voters, about half disapprove, but a good chunk, about 43% of Republicans in the state approve of how he's doing his job at this point.
Yeah, so among Republicans, Manchin's disapproval is 48%. His approval rating is 43%. If you go back to 2021, according to you all, his disapproval was, like 57%, and his approval was 35%. So he's not as bad as it was. It's not. I guess that's right.
I know. That's how we're thinking a lot about these Joe Manchin numbers right now. I mean, the lines are fascinating. You can see in the picture a big spike in approval among Republican voters as he was fighting against President Joe Biden's Inflation Reduction Act agenda. Folks really took note of that. And then whenever he sort of switched postures and helped the president pass this legislation, Republican voters turned on him. I think some distance from that has helped him improve his standing among the Republican electorate a bit in that state, which matters so much. And, possibly some of this talk about him running for president against Joe Biden, that might be getting on voters' minds. They don't like Joe Biden in West Virginia, and the idea that here maybe Joe Manchin again might be stepping up to the plate against him, might be helping him improve his numbers with Republicans in the state.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right. I mean, you can look at it's interesting where it crosses. I mean, Manchin's popularity in West Virginia peaked, at least in recent memory, peaked when he said no to the Inflation Reduction. And when he cut a deal on Inflation Reduction, the number flipped. Because the way it's viewed, I think, by a lot of folks in West Virginia, Eli, is that, oh, you stood up to Biden. And then it's like, oh, you gave in to Biden. I mean, it can probably be summarized that way. And that's how it impacted, I think, the number for him.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. We even saw that a bit with some independent voters in this state. I mean, he was like a star kicker against the Build Back Better agenda that was President Biden's initial policy pitch to the country. And he, in Kristen Sinema, became sort of famous in some quarters and reviled in other liberal quarters for their position on that. I think he made a choice to try to get some mining legislation done in the Inflation Reduction Act. That didn't quite work. I think Republicans came back and did it later. But clearly, folks took note that it maybe even seemed like a bit of a flip-flop to folks, that he was standing up so strongly against the president until he wasn't.
Yeah. But, he got a lot of stuff in the Inflation Reduction Act, which, again, is oddly named. But he got a lot of stuff in there, like completing the Mountain Valley Pipeline. And the challenge for him, which I think he's trying to exploit, is to come back to West Virginia and say, look what's in here. Look what you got. And that's what he's trying to do. Let me go to Jim Justice, West Virginia's governor, who's running for the Republican nomination for the U.S. Senate. Eli, what does Morning Consult have on him?
It's almost the opposite picture of Joe Manchin. Governor Justice is the sixth most popular governor in the country. 63% of voters there approve, 30% disapprove. That's pretty solid among Democrats, Republicans, and independents there. I think he saw a slight improvement among Republican voters in the last quarter when President Joe, after he announced his candidacy for Senate, and then former President Donald Trump eventually endorsed him toward the end of these surveys. He's very, very popular with Republicans in that state. About 77% approve of his job performance. Only about 1 in 5 disapproved. Those are good numbers heading into a primary that he looks like the leader in, and those are pretty solid numbers against the Democratic incumbent should he run for re-election next year.
Yeah, those really are, and they track another poll we saw not long ago about how his favorabilities in West Virginia, and with Justice there at 63%. And you look at the governors with the highest approval ratings in the country: Chris Sununu of New Hampshire, Josh Green of Hawaii, Mike Dunleavy of Alaska, and Ned Lamont of Connecticut. I mean, they're all in that 60% range. I mean, if you're in that 60% range, you're good, you're solid. I mean, at the moment.
I mean, the fascinating one to me was seeing Wes Moore, the new governor from Maryland, up there in that 60% approval rating right now. That's a pretty quick rise for West Virginia's neighbor there.
Yeah.
Look, most governors are popular. We're really not seeing governors underwater at this point with voters in their state. Even the least popular governor, Kim Reynolds in Iowa, is above water with about half of voters in her state approving of her job performance. There is a big load for Washington in this country right now, and governors seem to be at this point rising above it.
Interesting. That's interesting. Why do you think that is? Because they're, like you said, because they're not in Washington?
I think that, I think national politics generally is so polarized right now, and that's just not quite the world all these governors are living in. I mean, Bill Scott, the most popular governor in the country, was a Republican in Vermont, not the reddest state in America. Chris Sununu of New Hampshire, again, same thing there. The governors seem to be able to transcend some of the national politics. I mean, they're focused on issues that are more close to the American people, probably. I mean, they're not fighting against Marjorie Taylor Greene on whatever she said on Twitter today. They're trying to fund schools and roads in communities, and I think voters take note of that.